Welcome to Episode 4 of Rise of a Nation, the journey of independence and expansion. This episode is on Belize.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the history of Belize.
Ooh, Belize.
It's a country with such a unique blend of cultures and a really fascinating past. We've got a ton of material to sift through today. Articles, research papers, even some video clips.
Wow.
So much to explore, from ancient Mayan cities to pirate havens and then all the way to independence and modern-day Belize. What are you most excited to dig into?
Well, for me, it's the way Belize's history is like this tapestry woven from so many different threads. You know, you've got the ancient Maya, then European colonialism, the arrival of the Garifuna people,
Right.
and this constant tension between internal struggles and these external forces. It's amazing how it's all shaped the nation we see today.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off with those Maya then. They were the original inhabitants of this land, and they built a really incredible civilization centuries before Europeans even knew the Americas existed.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, these guys were building impressive cities, they developed advanced writing systems, math, and they left behind a legacy that you can still feel in Belize today. Those pyramids, temples rising from the jungle, it's incredible.
It's really something else, and what a lot of people don't realize is that Belize wasn't just some fringe area for them, it was a central hub.
Right in the heart of the Mayan world, a major center for trade and their unique culture.
A key part of that vast Mayan network.
Yeah.
And of course, their descendants are still a big part of Belizean society today.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Mayan languages are still spoken there, it really shows how deeply rooted their presence is.
Oh, absolutely. That's a living testament to their resilience. It's just amazing how these ancient echoes just ripple through time, you know?
They really do. But speaking of echoes, the Maya civilization in Belize eventually declined. And that decline, well, it's a mystery that historians are still debating today. What happened? Why did they abandon their major cities around 800 AD?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no single easy answer. It's this huge puzzle with pieces like environmental factors, droughts, maybe deforestation.
Cool.
Some folks point to internal conflicts or maybe some political instability within the civilization itself. It was probably a combination of things, to be honest. But the main takeaway, the thing to remember, is that the Maya didn't just disappear, poof, gone. They adapted. Their culture persisted, it evolved, and it lives on in those diverse Mayan communities that we see in Belize today.
It's a great reminder that history isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Definitely.
But let's fast forward a few centuries. We've got Europeans arriving on the scene in the 1600s, and they bring a whole new set of dynamics to Belize.
And how? Belize became a haven for British buccaneers. Think pirates! Swashbuckling pirates roaming the Caribbean looking for fortune and adventure. What a change of pace.
Right. Talk about a shift. We go from ancient temples and pyramids to pirate hideouts. It's almost like something out of a movie.
Totally. It was all daring raids, hidden treasure, constant battles at sea for control. And Belize, it was the perfect base for those pirates. Tons of logwood, which was valuable for making dyes.
Right.
Plus, close to those Spanish trade routes, prime real estate for a pirate.
Makes sense. And every pirate story needs a legendary figure. And that's where Peter Wallace comes in.
Yes. Peter Wallace.
The Scottish pirate captain who supposedly founded Belize City way back in 1638. The stories say he even used rum bottles in the construction.
Classic. Whether that detail is true or not, I mean, come on, rum bottles, who knows? It really captures the spirit of those early settlers. Resourceful, adaptable, carving out a new world amidst all the chaos. And those buccaneers, or the baymen as they were called.
The Baymen, right.
They really laid the groundwork for that permanent British presence in Belize. They went from pirates to, well, something closer to colonists. That logwood extraction, it became a major driving force in the development of Belize, right?
Absolutely. Logwood and later mahogany were huge for the British Empire. Shipbuilding, trade, it was a gold mine, really.
So we see this shift from a pirate haven to a more structured, formal British settlement focused on resources.
Exactly. It wasn't just about plunder anymore. It was about control. Control over valuable resources. And this is where things start to get even more interesting because Spain was not about to let the British just waltz in and take over.
Right. Spain already had a strong foothold in the Americas. They saw this British presence as a direct threat. So we're talking tensions, skirmishes, things are escalating.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And this all leads up to a pivotal moment in Belizean history, The Battle of St. George's Carry in 1798. Have you heard of this?
Absolutely. The sources talk about this battle as a defining moment for Belize.
It really was. A Spanish fleet tried to seize control of Belize, but the Baymen, they fought back with everything they had. And get this, they even had the enslaved Africans fighting alongside them.
They were outnumbered, but they were fierce, and they won. This victory didn't just solidify British control over Belize. It created a sense of national identity. It was this shared experience that really resonated for generations to come.
It's amazing how a single battle can have such a ripple effect through history. It shapes the political landscape, but also the collective memory of a whole nation.
Totally. And they still celebrate that victory in Belize to this day, a national holiday, remembering the unity and resilience they showed. But it also brings up a darker side of Belize's colonial past, that exploitation of enslaved Africans who were brought there to work those logging plantations.
Right, their forced labor fueled the colony's economy. Their stories are an integral part of understanding how Belize came to be. And we can't forget the Garifuna people arriving during this period, too.
Oh, absolutely. They add another layer to this incredible mix of cultures that we see in Belize. The Garifuna, with their unique blend of African and indigenous Caribbean heritage, they were exiled from their homeland and ended up settling along the coast of Belize. So you've got the Maya, the growing Afro-Bolivian population, and now the Garifuna. It created this really diverse and multicultural society, but it also created competition. Competition for land, for resources, and even for their own identity.
All of this blending of cultures and the weight of colonialism are such crucial pieces for understanding how Belize eventually found its way to independence. But before we get there, I'm really curious about how that British settlement evolved. How did it go from this kind of tenuous foothold, constantly being challenged by Spain, to a more established colony?
That's a good question. It was a gradual process driven by, well, economics and good old-fashioned political maneuvering. The British Crown, they knew those timber resources were valuable, and they wanted to formalize their control over Belize.
So it's not just those rugged baymen carving out a living anymore. We're starting to see the heavy hand of the British Empire.
For sure. And that shift wasn't without its hiccups. There was still tension with Spain, who hadn't given up their claim to Belize. For example, the Treaty of Paris in 1763. It allowed the British to stay in Belize, but there were conditions. Conditions they conveniently just ignored.
Huh, classic.
Yeah.
Playing a bit of a dangerous game there. What about the Baymen themselves? How do they react to all this increasing control from the crown? I mean, they were used to doing things their own way.
Oh, yeah. You better believe they had that independent frontier spirit. They weren't too keen on those restrictions coming from formal colonial rule. They had their own system of governance going, with elected magistrates in these public meetings that basically acted like a local parliament.
So almost like an early form of self-governance. They were used to making their own decisions.
Exactly. But as Belize's economy grew and those British interests expanded, the crown wanted more control. They sent in a superintendent appointed by London to run things.
I can imagine that didn't go over too well with the Baymen. You've got those folks on the ground used to their autonomy, and then these representatives from the crown coming in to enforce British laws.
Oh, it was a recipe for tension, for sure. That clash between local control and those making decisions from far away, it's a story that's played out so many times in history.
It's almost a universal theme, isn't it?
That's right.
And that tension continued throughout the 19th century as Belize dealt with those internal divisions, pressure from the outside world, and the lasting effects of slavery.
Definitely.
And then in 1838, you've got the abolition of slavery. That had to be a massive turning point for Belize, socially and economically.
Oh, absolutely. A huge moment. But it didn't magically fix everything. You see, even though slavery was officially over, those formerly enslaved people were forced into this apprenticeship system,
Right.
which basically meant forced labor that still benefited the plantation owners.
So the exploitation continued under a different name.
Sadly, yeah. It's a reminder that freedom isn't a switch you just flip. It's a process, a long and often difficult process. And in Belize, that process was tied up with those ongoing power struggles between the British Crown, the B'Mamin, and all the different groups trying to find their place in this incredibly complex society.
Mid-19th century Belize sounds like a real melting pot. You've got all these different cultures, ambitions, resentments, all simmering under the watchful eye of the British Empire. Sounds like a perfect recipe for conflict.
You got it. The 1800s were a wild ride for Belize. We're talking internal strife, external threats, and a growing sense of, hey, maybe we should be running things ourselves. It's really the foundation for their push towards independence.
That's so fascinating. The seeds of independence planted long before any official declaration.
Exactly. All those early struggles, frustrations, they were all building blocks.
It's a story we see repeated throughout history, isn't it? People fighting for their right to self-determination.
It is. And in Belize's case, those seeds, they were about to sprout. So as we move into the mid-1800s, Belize was going through some major changes. Tensions were high between those British colonists, and the indigenous Maya logging, was expanding deeper into the interior, that classic story of resource exploitation leading to conflict.
Yeah, it's like a broken record throughout history, isn't it? One group comes in and claims the land and resources that another group has called home for centuries, bound to cause some friction.
You got it. And to make matters worse, you've got the caste war happening just across the border in the Yucatan Peninsula. This was a struggle for Mayan autonomy against the ruling classes, and it had a huge ripple effect on Belize.
Our sources mention this massive wave of refugees fleeing the violence in Yucatan. How did that impact Belize, which was already dealing with its own internal divisions?
Imagine this. You've got a relatively small colony, and suddenly thousands of refugees are pouring in. Many of them Mestizo and Yucatec Maya, each with their own culture and needs. It stretched resources thin and led to even more conflicts over land use.
Adding fuel to the fire, basically.
Exactly. It's like throwing a bunch of different ingredients into an already bubbling pot. And right in the middle of all this, the British, facing economic woes of their own, decided to tighten their grip on Belize. They declared it a crown colony in 1862.
So even less autonomy for Belize. I'm guessing the Baymen weren't thrilled about that.
Oh, they weren't happy. They saw it as a loss of their traditional rights and a power grab by the crown. But it also reflected a bigger shift in the economic landscape. See, this crown colony status opened the door for these massive London-based companies to come in and take control of huge chunks of land, further marginalizing the locals.
Talk about a double whammy. They're losing political control and economic opportunities at the same time.
Yep, and it created a breeding ground for resentment. This sense of enough is enough. It's what fueled the movement for self-determination in the 20th century. Belizeans saw their land and resources being exploited, and they started demanding more control over their own destiny.
It's like those early struggles planted the seeds for their eventual fight for independence.
Absolutely. It was a slow burn, but those frustrations were building. And as we move into the 20th century, things really start to heat up. World War I, and then the Great Depression exposed just how unfair the colonial system was. It fueled a growing sense of nationalism in Belize.
People started to realize they were being treated like second-class citizens in their own land.
Yeah.
Denied opportunities, their voices silenced. It's a story we've heard before, unfortunately.
It is a familiar and tragic pattern. But in the face of this injustice, something powerful started to emerge. Labor unions began to organize workers, demanding better conditions. These unions became hubs for political activism, paving the way for political parties that would champion the cause of independence.
It's fascinating how the fight for workers' rights so often goes hand in hand with broader struggles for political freedom.
It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every individual, no matter their social or economic status. And that message resonated with Belizeans. They were tired of being exploited, tired of being voiceless. They wanted a say in their future.
Our sources point to the People's United Party, or PUP, as a key player in this movement for self-determination. What can you tell us about them?
The PUP emerged in the 1950s. They were champions of the working class, advocating for social justice, economic reforms, and ultimately full independence from Britain. Their leader, George Price, was a charismatic guy, a real visionary. He became a symbol of Belizean nationalism.
He's often called the father of the nation, which says a lot about his impact on their journey to independence.
He was a game changer. He understood what Belizeans wanted, and he knew how to navigate the tricky world of international politics to make it happen. Under his leadership, the PUP won a string of elections showing just how much support there was for independence.
But I imagine there were roadblocks along the way, both within Belize and from external forces.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the biggest hurdles was that long-standing territorial dispute with Guatemala. They had never given up their claim to parts of Belize, and it created a lot of uncertainty. It could have easily derailed the whole independence movement.
Like a dark cloud hanging over everything.
It was a constant threat. But Belizeans were determined to move forward. It took skillful diplomacy pressure from the international community and a whole lot of grit. The PUP government worked with the United Nations to try and find a peaceful solution with Guatemala.
So a delicate dance, trying to claim their independence while also dealing with a powerful neighbor.
Exactly. It was a tense time. Nobody knew for sure what would happen. But in the end, the desire for self-determination prevailed. On September 21st, 1981, Belize officially declared independence. A historic moment for the nation.
Wow, what a moment. After centuries of colonial rule, they were finally free. But I'm guessing independence didn't solve all their problems overnight. What new challenges did they face?
Independence brought a whole new set of challenges and opportunities. They had to build their own institutions, diversify their economy, and tackle social and economic inequalities that had been rooted in the colonial era.
Like stepping out from someone else's shadow and learning to walk on your own. Exciting and scary at the same time.
Exactly. And they had to do all this while navigating the Cold War, managing their relationship with Guatemala, and finding their place on the global stage, a period of massive transition.
One thing that really stands out about Belize's independence is their decision to stay in the Commonwealth of Nations. It seems like a bit of a contradiction. Embracing independence while maintaining ties to their former colonizer. What was the thinking behind that?
It reflects the complex layers of Belizean identity. They wanted to break free from colonial structures and assert their sovereignty, but they also recognize the shared history, culture, and legal traditions that connect them to Britain and other Commonwealth countries.
Honoring the past while moving towards the future, choosing what parts of that legacy to keep and what to leave behind.
It's a nuanced approach, and being part of the Commonwealth has practical benefits too. Things like development aid, educational opportunities, and a network of diplomatic support. For a small nation like Belize, those connections can be invaluable.
Like a safety net. Some support as they navigate the often choppy waters of international relations.
Exactly. It provides stability and continuity, especially in areas like the legal system and education where British influence is still strong.
Speaking of the legal system, Belize adopted a parliamentary democracy based on the Westminster model. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, the Westminster system is what they use in the United Kingdom. It's got a prime minister as the head of government, a bicameral legislature with an elected House of Representatives, and an appointed Senate, and a system of political parties competing for power through elections.
So they took that model and adapted it to fit Belize, like a blueprint they customized.
Right. And one interesting adaptation is the role of the Senate. In the UK, the House of Lords is mostly hereditary. But in Belize, the senators are appointed by the Governor General, and they represent different groups and sectors of society.
So a mix of elected officials and appointed representatives. What's the purpose of that structure?
It's about balance, making sure different voices are heard in the lawmaking process. The Senate acts as a check on the House reviewing and amending legislation.
Like a built-in system to prevent any one group from having too much power.
Exactly. It reflects their commitment to democracy and inclusive governance. But as with any system, there's always debate about how to make it even more representative and responsive to the people's needs.
Sounds like Belizeans are actively shaping their democracy, which is great to see. But let's talk about the political parties themselves. Our sources mention a two-party system that's been dominant since independence.
Right. You've got the People's United Party, or PUP, which we talked about earlier, and the United Democratic Party, or UDP. They've been the main players offering different visions for Belize's future.
That classic political rivalry, each party with its own set of values and priorities. Can you give us a sense of what they stand for and how they've shaped Belizean politics?
Historically, the PUP has leaned more towards a socialist approach. They emphasize social programs, welfare initiatives, and government involvement in the economy. They've also been big proponents of regional integration and stronger ties with their Central American neighbors.
So they prioritize social justice and a more active role for the government in economic development.
That's a good way to put it. The UDP, on the other hand, has typically taken a more pro-business free market stance. They focus on private sector growth, fiscal responsibility, and attracting foreign investment.
The classic left versus right dynamic,
Yeah.
each appealing to a different segment of the population.
Yeah, it's a simplification, but it captures the main differences in their ideologies. Of course, in practice, both parties have had to adapt to the realities of governing a small nation with limited resources and complex challenges.
It's always interesting to see how those ideologies play out in the real world. And in Belize's case, those policies have been shaped by a unique mix of history, culture, and economic realities.
Absolutely. And as Belize continues to navigate the 21st century, these political dynamics will be crucial in shaping its future.
We've covered so much ground already. Ancient civilizations, colonial struggles, independence, and the inner workings of Belize's government. But there's one more key piece of the puzzle: their membership in the Commonwealth of Nations. It's a decision that speaks to both continuity and change, honoring the past while embracing the future.
It really highlights the complexities of post-colonial identity and the challenges of finding your place in a globalized world. And it continues to shape Belize's relationship with Britain and the broader international community.
So we know Belize chose to stay in the Commonwealth. What does that actually mean for them?
Yeah.
Are there real benefits, or is it more of a symbolic thing?
Well, it's kind of both. Symbolically, it's a nod to that shared history, that connection with other Commonwealth nations. It acknowledges a past even as they're building their own independent future. But there are some practical perks too, especially for a smaller country like Belize.
Yeah, the sources mention things like economic development programs and educational opportunities. What do those look like?
The Commonwealth has all these programs and initiatives aimed at helping out its member states. Things like education, healthcare, and boosting their economies. For Belize, that means access to scholarships, training programs, even technical help they might not get otherwise.
It's like a support system, a group of friends who can lend a hand, share what they know, and offer resources. That can be huge for a country working towards development.
Exactly. Plus, there's the whole diplomatic support angle. The Commonwealth is like a platform for these countries to speak up on the world stage. They can share ideas, work together on common problems, and really amplify their voice.
Strength in numbers. It makes sense, especially in the world of international relations where things can get pretty complicated.
For sure. And for Belize, with that ongoing situation with Guatemala, that support from the Commonwealth has been super important.
Right, that territorial dispute. It's been there throughout Belize's history, even after independence. It's like this underlying tension that never quite goes away.
It's a tough legacy from their colonial past. It affects their foreign policy, how they interact with their neighbors. They've tried to resolve it through negotiations, bringing in international mediators, but it's still a touchy subject.
Independence doesn't just erase history, does it?
Nope. It shows that past issues can really have a lasting impact.
And for Belize, it means walking a tightrope. They want to protect their land and be in control, but they also have to maintain a good relationship with Guatemala. It's a tricky balance.
You got it. It's complex, no easy answers, but it seems like Belize is dedicated to finding a peaceful resolution.
Which is hopeful.
Definitely. And being part of the Commonwealth gives them a structure for talking and cooperating. Those shared values and principles can be helpful.
It's like finding common ground, a starting point for understanding each other better and bridging those gaps.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to work together, build that trust, and look for solutions that work for everyone.
That's a great message, especially in a world where conflict seems to be everywhere you look. But let's bring it back to present-day Belize. After all they've been through colonization, fighting for independence, building a democracy, what are some of the big challenges they face today? And what opportunities do they have?
Well, Belize is at a crossroads. They're dealing with internal and external pressures. Economically, they're still trying to tackle poverty, inequality, and reliance on just a few industries, like tourism and agriculture.
The sources paint this picture of a country with such incredible natural beauty and a rich culture, but also one that's struggling to create opportunities for everyone.
That's about right. And climate change is a huge threat. Rising sea levels, extreme weather. It all impacts Belize's coastal communities and their tourism.
It's a reminder that even as Belize is trying to build a strong future, they're also on the front lines of this global issue that needs a global response.
Definitely. It's not a fight they can win alone. And that's where that Commonwealth network, with its focus on sustainability and dealing with climate change, can step in and help.
It's about sharing knowledge, resources, figuring out what works best, and then doing it together.
Yeah. And aside from those external pressures, Belize has internal issues too. Politics getting polarized, corruption, crime, these things can weaken their democracy and their sense of unity.
Seems like a lot to handle. But throughout their history, there's this thread of resilience, a determination to overcome these obstacles.
Absolutely. They have this deep-rooted spirit of independence and a we can do this ourselves attitude. They're not afraid to stand up for what they believe in and make their own way.
It's pretty inspiring when you think about all they've accomplished. I have to say, after this deep dive into Belize's story, I'm really impressed by their journey.
It's a journey that's still going. It's full of challenges, but also possibilities. For anyone who wants to know more about Belize, to explore this fascinating nation and its diverse cultures, I say go for it. There's so much to discover.
It's a call to adventure, right? Go beyond what you see in the news and really get to know this country. It's full of surprises. And as always, we encourage our listeners to keep exploring, asking questions, and digging deeper into the stories that shape our world.
Thank you for watching Episode 4 of Rise of a Nation, the Journey of Independence and Expansion. If you enjoyed this podcast, Please like and subscribe for more. Write in the comments what country's independence and expansion you would like me to cover next.